Hi, and welcome to the channel to the first part of what I'm loosely calling my first season of my French cinema season. Plan is to take one film roughly from each decade from the 1930s up and talk about it in terms of theme, in terms of plot, in terms of ideas, and imparts relevance to the events of the world that were going along around that time and what was happening around cinema, and why this film is worth talking about or worth watching. And a mixture of these films will be either films that I've seen either once or more times beforehand, or a film that I watched that seemed to fit or be different enough around that time to talk about. And if I'm going to start in the 1930s, there's really no other place to start off than one of the most important, I would say, films of all time, or one that many people will revere for numerous reasons, and we'll discuss reasons why that may be. You may be familiar with it, you may not, you may have heard about it, you might not have, but it is the film that has got infamy, certainly in boutique Blu-ray collecting circles, as being spine number one in the Criterion collection. That is Jean Renoir's Le Grande Illusion. The Grande Illusion is a 1936 film which stars Jean Gabin as a co-pilot or helper for a pilot who are shot down in enemy territory and captured by the Germans. Now, this is all set in World War I, and while the film is a war film, it is a war film of taste, or it is not a bombastic war film that many war films you've seen before, because there's hardly a bullet fired, there's hardly a shout of anger. This is a film about the nicer side of war, or what happens behind the scenes in war. It talks about the relationships between the people that are both together and their captors, and what Jean Renoir was thinking about that. Jean Gabin is a mechanic to the more celebrated Captain Blonde. They are thrust together into the same captivity. And what you have is a film that explores, like I say, relationships between different nationalities, but also relationships around aristocracy and working class. And really, this is what the film is about, regardless of experiences of war. Because on one level, we have Captain Blonde, the captured French officer who's from the aristocracy. And then you have Erich von Stroheim's character, von Rauffenstein, who is the German aristocrat who is his captor. And one of the ideas that Renoir had, and that he has said about subsequently, is that our circumstances are the things that bind us together. He often says, rather than the Frenchness of each other being the people or our nationality that binds us together, that is our experiences. So he uses the experience or the example of a Chinese farmer and a French farmer meeting. As long as they could get over the language barrier, they would have lots to speak about. Whereas the aristocracy and the working class have less to speak around once they get their common bond of being French out of the way. So these are the themes that are explored within. And sure enough, von Rauffenstein and Captain Blonde bond over their common upbringing. There is a camaraderie around people of same class, even in war situations. And they will dine together, just like the working class can dine together. But one of the other nice things that comes into this is that the aristocracy and the working class, they see that these things are changing in the modern world. So things like wealth are going to break down these class barriers. If you have enough wealth, it can subjugate or tear apart these boundaries. An example being, one of the captors is a Jewish banker. He comes from a family of Jewish bankers, and they have wealth. And while he's in captivity together with the other people that are supposedly of working class, they can eat quite well, because his family send him food packages into captivity, and they eat lavishly, just like the aristocracy. And while Blonde and von Rauffenstein think about, how they're the last bastions of that generation, it is borne out with what you have here. And while there are other themes and there are other parts of this film brought to the fore, it is these that stick in the mind. The idea that those in captivity are trying to escape is one that runs throughout the film as they are thwarted by both circumstance or by otherwise. And you get this really wonderful taste of, even at the end, of how barriers and people's needs circumvent the underlying themes or the underlying beliefs that are there. I do intend to talk about some of the relationships between the director and what they made, though, because Jean Renoir was somebody that fought in the First World War. He had an injury that he sustained, and this is sort of loosely autobiographical about many of the experiences that he thought he had or experienced around that time, and what was supposedly a gentleman's war of World War One, and on the back of or in the face of World War Two coming across, which was a very militant war, which was much more about technology, which was much more about hatred. This contrasts with what World War One was. Now, on the side of this, you have what actually happened in the film itself, and this is, I think, one of the lovely bits of story that actually where art mimics life, because this film was used and seen as a bit of a populist piece around war and what war should be and what it shouldn't be. So much so that when the Nazis seen it, they confiscated it. They got rid of the film. They did not want it seen. When Roosevelt seen it in America it was shown as a part of a birthday party for his wife, he fell in love with the film. He wanted it widely seen. He thought this was the very embodiment of what a modern society should be. So while he was praising it, the Nazis were looking rid of it. This kind of idea of populist or using the film as a way to tell a message or to spread the good word was very much at the far ends of the spectrum. In fact, Le Grande Illusion was confiscated so much that people thought it was lost to time. Turns out that it was in the Russian held part of Berlin, and they decided to take it away with them for many years and put it in the Moscow Film Foundation. And it was only returned to France in around 1960 to Toulouse for restoration and for looking at, and as a piece of grand cinema. Other prints that were used at the time, there was one put out in 1948. They were pieced together from other surviving elements, but the original full film was only really brought back in that stage, and then later rescanned and cleaned up, and the film that we see today bears fruit from that. It is a stunningly beautiful picture, even by modern standards, in the form that we have it. The release that I had, which was the Studio Canal version, has lots of really considered extras, both about the journey of the film, how it passed from nation to nation, and how those nations had to work together for a common goal of restoring this film. And the fact that nobody actually did, even though it was hated by the Nazis, they didn't actually destroy it. They held on to it and stored it away so it wouldn't be seen. And in many parts of Nazi life, they appreciated art. And there was an appreciation of how powerful art could be, insofar as, Goebbels had Leni Riefenstahl make propaganda films. So this is Le Grande Illusion. This is the film that we see today, and one that I desperately think everybody should check out in some way, shape or form. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time when we go to the 1940s. And as well as a surprise and for let you prepare, I'll tell you what film that I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about Panique by Jules de Vivier. A story about another Jewish person in the face of war. I'll catch you then. Speak to you then. Take care. Bye.